Earlier this week, for the second time in months, Israel was the target of a large-scale missile attack. 180 missiles from Iran launched this week's attack, but as in the earlier attack, the Israeli missile defense system and a US-led Western coalition successfully repelled it. The Iran missile attack demonstrates two outcomes of the Ukraine war. The first is the importance of ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as drones, to conduct attacks from standoff distances. The second is the importance of air and missile defense systems to repel these attacks. This week's attack has sparked arguments from Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to request more military aid from the West. President Zelensky's request, which highlights the duplicity of the West's relationship with Israel in comparison to Ukraine, is not exactly a case of letting a crisis go to waste. The initial perspective posits that Iran's in-house ballistic and cruise missiles carried out the attack on Israel. Iran has stepped up its missile shipments to Russia, intending to use them against Ukraine. The subtle accusation is that the US and the West are more assertive in their warnings against Iran's missile use against Israel than they are against Iran's permission to use its weapons against Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky also points out that despite strict weapon usage regulations in the West, especially the United States and Germany, the Iranians are not imposing any restrictions on the weapons they send to Russia. The United States and Germany have a policy that forbids the use of their donated longer-range weapons or any weapon utilizing US technology against Russian targets, except for Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, where the US and Germany allow their weapons to be used to attack inside Russia to defend Kharkiv. The restrictions in Germany mirror those in the United States. Ukraine also wants more long-range weapons from the United States, similar to those Russia has already received from North Korea and Iran. On the other side of the argument, President Zelensky is asking for more air and missile defense systems. This week, Romania sent another US-made Patriot battery to Ukraine to help, as European allies, led by Germany, have requested that European countries review their stockpile and send more air defense systems to Ukraine. President Zelensky gave his public gratitude about receiving the Romanian battery, but then he added his thoughts over air defense and the recent attack on Israel. President Zelensky, during his remarks, pointed out that an international coalition had worked together to shoot down missiles from Iran targeted against Israel, and such a coalition needs to come together in the same way to defend Ukraine against Russian attacks. President Zelensky added, "Ukraine has been telling all its neighbours and key partners for a long time that we must cooperate, that we must shoot down drones and missiles together, especially in areas close to NATO borders." Mr. Zelensky was using the occasion of the Russian drones crossing into Romanian and Polish airspace to personalise his case to his Romanian audience and called for an Israel-like Western coalition to operate in defence of Ukraine airspace from Russian missiles. President Zelensky's argument would make sense if international relations were simple, black-and-white affairs, but his transitive property argument is amateurish and dangerous. While it is clear that Israel is not Ukraine and Iran is not Russia, it is also evident that these countries are crucial to maintaining geopolitical stability. NATO would be involved in a coalition to counter Russian missile attacks on Ukraine, potentially turning the Ukraine war into a European-wide conflict. We expect NATO border countries to shoot down Russian missiles across international borders, thereby projecting NATO force and effectively putting NATO at war with Russia. We all know that Russia is also armed with nuclear weapons, as President Putin frequently reminds the world. However, there has never been a large-scale conflict involving two nuclear-armed adversaries, and in this case, four, including Russia, the US, the United Kingdom, and France. A war involving nuclear-armed adversaries would be unprecedented. Just as Russia is nuclear-armed, Iran is not, so a conflict with Iran does not carry the same risk as a war with Russia. Iran has consistently threatened to cut off oil from the Persian Gulf, making it a strategic objective for the United States to maintain control over Iran. There are also no international defense alliances to defend Israel, so the Western coalition can determine how much pressure they want to exert without having the ramifications of something like NATO Article 5, forcing a legal requirement that could widen the war. This means that Israel has no guarantees of Western protection, and the West has the latitude to determine how much pressure it wants to exert without a treaty requirement. The other issue is Israel's nuclear armament, which could potentially incentivize a nuclear power facing defeat to resort to nuclear weapons as a last resort. Given that Iran is a much larger country than Israel, and could potentially overwhelm them due to Israel's limited defensive depth, the West's interest in preventing a more devastating conflict is served by providing them with a level of protection against Iran. President Zelensky has consistently stated that he desires weapons from the West to combat Russia. He is now not only promoting the acquisition of additional air defense weapons, which are urgently required, but also proposing an expansion of the war. This comes after his Ukraine victory plan failed to meet the expectations of the US and other Western leaders. The victory plan's apparent lack of a way forward with peace has caused Western leaders to consider that they may have to be the ones to approach Russia over peace talks on Ukraine's behalf. This would not be an ideal solution, reminiscent of the Munich Agreement of 1938, but considering that President Zelensky seems unable to realistically find a way forward to even discuss peace and is advocating for widening the war, maybe the bad option is the only option. That would be expected, given that the entire war has been characterized by poor choices and poor decisions.